I'm going to have you repeat that one more time. And I am recording now, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
Because that was beautiful.
Well, and I think it's important also that we always dedicate, the intention before we begin anything. And today is Sagadawa, which is one of the 4 really high holy days in Buddhism. And so it's a day of multiplication. If something of merit and benefit is generated, it multiplies. So it's my prayer that we create real benefit here today.
I love that. How do you pronounce that again?
Sagadawa, Sagadawa.
2 words.
2 words.
That's beautiful. I love that. I love the idea of multiplying
Merit.
love and peace and goodness.
Absolutely. Not only that, but it's, what an opportunity. And, today you wanted to talk about building community. And I think always before we begin anything, we want to really establish a firm commitment that whatever we're doing, I don't care if it's the dishes, somehow creates benefit. And so, and it's actually how we always started everything we ever did, was create this moment of intention.
I think that's extremely important in community, any type of community engaged work, because I kind of see it as everyone aligning their energies together, knowing purpose, coming to a singular point of understanding so that you can, people are going to come with different knowings and ways of seeing the world, and to kind of rally around a central purpose means that, there has to be some kind of centering, some kind of focus, some kind of centering in order to allow, I think, that process to unfold. And I love the idea of starting that way.
Me too. And it's so funny because, again, it always puts us into process when you throw that little tidbit out. Oh, we're going to talk about how you galvanize community. And in this time, what a difficult job, right? Everybody is so in their own camp and so afraid to move across. We were reminded of a particular, after Raul's death, and trying to get the community back together. And we did a community forum that was to build community. And we got stuck in the definition of community. Nobody could agree on what community meant. And so when that is the opening assumption, there's some roadblocks ahead, right? I mean,
well, it's going to guarantee that someone's going to be left out.
Absolutely.
So that's where we were in when they started to talk about issues. Then we said, well, what about kids? Well, they're community, aren't they? Well, they're not at the table. So that's, as an example, what's happening today with Starbucks.
Yeah, literally today. Yeah.
So that's an interesting thing to see in terms of really what are they going to do? What are the outcomes? What is the motivation, first of all?
Right.
Is this to clean up their mess? Or so it's interesting, but it's all part of community because Starbucks is part of the community. So I'm really interested to see what the outcomes are of this.
So in talking about community and getting to an understanding of community, what are some ways in your work? You said that not everyone had different ideas of what community was. And what was your process of getting people to, and I don't know if it occurred where everyone was on board with one definition or if there were multiple ones, but how do you create community that is as inclusive of everyone's ideas of it as possible?
It really and truly, I think what it comes from is listening to people number one, and then finding out where the common threads are. So when we did some work at Glendale High, there had been a riot, and it was Armenians and Latinos, and it was great. And there were like 30 kids involved, and they were either going to be expelled from the district or take 3 weeks with us. I still love that. I think that's an awesome threat. But what we did, and they started out sitting away from each other, against each other, in opposition to one another. So the first thing we did was we broke down that circle, and it was one Latino, one Armenian, one Latino, one Armenian in a circle. So they had to actually be with each other, be next to each other. And then we started looking at the components of culture. What are the components of culture, right? There's religion, there's clothing, there's food, there's all of these things that are celebrations. And so we started looking at those elements. And not surprising to you, I'm sure, there was only one thing that was significantly different between the two, and that was language. That was it. Everything else kind of lined up, and I think they were all in shock. So it's fine, what? What? I'm like you? Oh no, you just took away my enemy. So that's where I think it begins, is finding those threads of commonality. And so if I'm going into a pretty contentious group, I might say, just like me, you want to be happy. Just like me, you don't want to suffer. And so you begin there. Yeah, that's a great beginning spot.
Right.
And then you can move into the other things, because who wants to suffer? Who doesn't want to be happy?
So when they began to realize their similarities, the ways in which they were more alike than not, what kind of relationships began to unfold, and how were you able then to take those understandings that they began to see their commonalities and move them forward to a space where they could have conversations around how they were going to maybe behave in ways that were actually going to be of benefit to one another, rather than leaving the space with both of you and creating more like either divisiveness or perpetrating violence? Or how did you do that?
Actually, it was pretty simple, because it was something they all wanted: employment. So you can't, we're telling them, and they ended up doing job training with us, almost all of them. And that's what they wanted, is a job. Well, you can't go in hating other people who you're going to be working with and be successful in that realm. So it was something that they wanted. It was something practical. It was something that they didn't have at the time. And it caused them to have to work together. It's sort of simple, really, in a lot of ways. As I look now where we are in this country, and everyone claims to be the most American, I find such great sadness that there's not that feeling of all my neighbors here, whether they're Americans or not, are Americans, right? They're in America. We share a way of living.
Right.
And so I wish we could talk about all of this differently. That, instead of saying I'm this more than you, it's tell me how you're this. Asking those questions, appreciative inquiry, right? We're back to that, is tell me about yourself. Tell me what you have accomplished. Tell me what has given you the greatest joy in your life. And all of a sudden that conversation changes.
Right.
With the part, it's also that with this group that we're speaking about, Glendale High, they probably saw each other on campus but never interacted in a positive way. And so that was something that was missing in the relationship. And looking at that, and looking at other instances where we worked with community, building community, it was always that there was this absence of a real interaction, positive interaction. As an example, this weekend, Linda and I went to another wonderful Armenian wedding. And It was a lot of people, a lot of people, a lot of food. But when they did the table assignments, they put us with all the English-speaking people, all the non-Armenians. And it's always interesting when we sit with them because this group had never been to an Armenian wedding, so they didn't know what to expect. And so we're telling them, pace yourself. This is a long one. Take it easy.
You're not going to make it through appetizers if you don't slow down.
But I was sitting next to a Latino couple, and sometime during the evening, I leaned over to the wife, and I said, well, the husband was listening to, and I said, this is why people rush to judgment about other groups, because they never have a positive interaction with them. Here we are with all these Armenians, and we're celebrating, we're having a wonderful time. This is what needs to occur more and more. I don't know how, in what way. There were some things that we did in the past, but that I can mention. But the fact that you don't have those interactions, the same as if you have a negative interaction with a police officer, is all you know, then that's what your world is. So it's the same thing. If you had a bad experience with another ethnic group, then you're going to chastise the whole group just because of that experience. So it's really wrong in thinking, but that's something that needs to be addressed in a different way. One of the things that I got to experience even before I met Linda, and we tried to do it in Glendale, was some friends of mine when I was a little boy, some friends of ours in the neighborhood took me to an all-states picnic in Azusa. And it was on Azusa Avenue, and they had blocked off the street, and it had a park meridian in the center, park-like meridian. They had picnic tables and then signs for all the states of the United States, and people who were from those states came and hung out representing their state. The food, music, everything was so nice, and you could just walk up and down and visit Washington, visit North Carolina. It was really great. So we tried to do that in Glendale, but we called it a gift of culture. And that was to celebrate all the different cultures in Glendale and bringing out all the positive aspects. And it was such a wonderful, wonderful experience. People just were amazed of all the wonderful things that existed in their own community, but were totally unaware.
Yeah,
I think it's important to really address assumptions. And again, this is something I got focused on after appreciative inquiry, is we are creatures of our assumptions, right? If we assume that this is true, then nothing else is truer. And yet it may be completely false. It could be partly true. It could be any number of permutations of that. But when we're stuck to the assumption, we quit learning, we quit growing, we quit experiencing. And so really examining our assumptions, I think, is the first step to doing that. And with kids, we always, what are the assumptions about you? And they could rattle that off, right? We're irresponsible, we're losers, we're this, we're that. And all of it was negative, which was really interesting. Mm-hmm. And yeah, because there are also the assumptions, and we would throw in our own assumptions, that they were positive beacons of light that just potential becoming. And so it would, oh, what? You think that about me? Little me? And it was yes. And they would rise into that assumption. It was truly interesting.
I think too, I just want to follow up with what Jose was saying, and the word that came to me is just when you were talking about Starbucks and you were talking about kind of the opposite, which is what you guys were involved in with Glendale, with all of the different community members coming out and sharing like their assets and their, the parts of their culture that we're seeing so positively. But this notion of how here in the United States we do so much self-segregation, like a lot of, like, you have gated communities and you have environments that are created so that you only stay in your own little pockets and you don't necessarily even need to interact with people who you perceive are different.
Don't know who you want to.
Right. No, and the community forums, and this was way back in the early 90s when we were doing that, and that's something I think every community in the world would benefit from. And that was where you had a topic, and I would pick maybe more relevant topics than traffic, but you had a topic and you were broken into diverse groups. So if there were 200 people, maybe there were 25 different groups. And so, but you had someone from each race, someone from, age was balanced out. All of the elements were balanced out so that the group actually represented the community. And then each week you would meet at a different person's home. Well, when you start going into someone's home, then you really see how people are living. And so it was the poor, it was the wealthy, it was everything.
You'd be in an apartment or in a mansion.
Yeah. And the dialogue was created in the environment itself. Just by moving people into a different environment, changed the conversation. And watching the humility of people and it was all broken down. They didn't know each other, but they would talk to each other about a common issue. And maybe traffic's a good place to start. I don't know, but because traffic affects everyone. So maybe that's where you start. But what happened was these people started seeing the other people as human beings, not as that group. And as you moved around the community, it blended the community. It was a powerful exercise, and it's something that really should come back in a big way all over.
It was successful enough that some of the groups, once the program ended, agreed to continue meeting on their own. And,
oh, wow.
Yeah, to me, that was a testimony that this is something that was needed and something that they really wanted, And I think it's possible in this atmosphere, but it will take a lot because, oftentimes people think, oh, I'm supposed to go there to argue to argue your point. No, you're there to listen also, and that's really what's important. And no one listens to each other. They just shout at each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the unfortunate parts of all of this community building is a lot of the positive activities, such as the community forums, such as Seeds for Peace,
police-youth relations.
They all went by the wayside, not because the participants didn't want to, but the sponsors didn't want to continue sponsoring. Whether it was the city or the police department or the chamber, whoever was involved thought, well, that's enough. It's fixed. No, it's never fixed.
No.
And you can see the regression, things going back to the way that they were before. And also them wondering what's wrong? What went wrong? Well,
that somehow the project went wrong or something like that. I know. I think what I was just having this conversation today with one of my colleagues about doing community-based engaged work, and how she was saying, just attending to the whole notion of time and how you don't just drop in and do a project and leave, and you don't just say something's going to be fixed in a few months, or you commit. It's a life, it's a life decision. It's, when you're committed to community work, to your community or to the community with whom you're working, it really is a deep commitment in a way, like a relationship that you're building for, that you're going to need to nurture and there needs to be trust and respect and all those things that can take years. And to just pull the plug on that, is really devastating.
For everybody.
Yeah.
It's devastating for everyone. I mean, it really is. And people feel that loss, and it shows up in isolation and things like that. And we're so isolated from each other right now. It's what we're doing as individuals now is making sure that our neighbors know that we care deeply about them. That's it. I mean, we're not
Building community.
Yeah, I mean, one neighborhood at a time. And politically, we're probably somewhere way far away from where a lot of people are here, but they like our yard, and so we start with they like our yard.
Yeah.
Our next door neighbor wanted to help me get rid of my wasps, and bless his heart, he is the kindest man, but that was a lethal removal of them. And so of course I couldn't, but he asked and he knew I wasn't going to. So, they respect that I'm going to do it that way. And I respect that he's not.
Right. So even in today's climates, I have a couple of questions or a few questions for you guys. I was thinking a lot before we got on Zoom about the understanding life is precious, those 4 pillars that you had discussed. Appreciating impermanence, recognizing every thought, deed, and action has a consequence, either positive or negative. And then having the ability to look outside of ourselves and to see the suffering of others. And it requires that, great empathy when we decide to actually do something for another, because another person is suffering, to help alleviate that suffering, to like that very humbling process of recognizing our own self in another human being. And thinking about those 4 pillars, I was thinking, since the last time we spoke, I think it was in December, there's a lot that has happened politically and in the whole landscape of what's occurring in this country. And a lot of, we started our conversation about a year ago with community and nonviolence. And it's very interesting to now, like almost a year later, like we're coming back to community and we're seeing a world that it just feels and is so much more divisive, and there's so much violence, and violence not just with physical action, but with rhetoric and with ways that we consciously, that our systems are consciously marginalizing and oppressing certain groups. And so so I'm framing all this within the context of the 4 pillars, and I'm trying to think about maybe if you could talk about where we are today, thinking about those pillars, and kind of what is our vision now? Like where do we go with the way that things are today?
I would love to have the opportunity to sit with those Parkland kids. That's where we are today. They made a powerful jump into the world that has been given to them, right? This is not the world that they necessarily created, but they were dropped into it in a rush. And I loved the comment of one of the girls who said she recognized her privilege and wanted to use it to benefit others. That's what we're talking about, is that she recognizes she has this precious life. She has seen impermanence up close and personally, and her actions have value and merit, and she wants to help. How fortunate to have young people so articulate in that framework. My hope's not a good strategy, but my hope is with them, that they have the strength and the courage and the support to keep going, because they have the power to make this kind of change. We've seen what they can do. Now, sustaining that is the hard part. Sustaining support is the hard part, just like what we were talking about programs. If this goes viral and they need support, my hands up. Right? However we could help, I would want to help them, because they really can do this, and I believe in them. all of them. And at that march, I mean, that was so profound and so powerful. They were so inclusive of others, right? They invited people in from all over the country, young people just like them who had witnessed violence and are saying enough. And then they got shot down by the adults, right? The hubris. I don't even know what to say about the adults and the way that they have misbehaved in this. That these kids are right on, and anybody with sense should be listening to them.
How about you, Jose? What was your take on what occurred with well, there's been even more shootings since the Parkland shooting, so.
Yeah, but in you speaking about mentioning the four pillars, and I was thinking recently when all that commotion about all these illegals coming up to the border and coming up from Central America, and thinking, well, listening to what people were saying about them, particularly one person who has a lot of influence, having no understanding whatsoever of the suffering that they've gone through in their home country and the suffering that they incurred trying to come into this country. If this country didn't have something positive to offer them, they wouldn't make that journey. Absolutely not. So there's a compelling reason for them to attempt to do this even at the risk of losing their lives. It's better than what they have back there. So that to me is like, how do you get the people who would be critical of that to understand the suffering of these people and have a little more compassion rather than demonizing them that they're going to ruin our country by being here. This country has never been ruined by immigrants, never been ruined by immigrants. It's enhanced over and over. So that to me is very important, partly because I'm an immigrant too, and I take it personal. But also, this can be transferred to any group. It doesn't matter. With the release of prisoners because of overcrowding, they demonize the prisoners. There's always someone that they can blame for all the problems, and that's the unfortunate part, because we're not looking for solutions. We're just looking for someone to blame.
And I've got to add on to that, because this was a very recent conversation that I had with an evangelical Christian whom I actually love very much. And when she started talking about personal responsibility, it was really interesting to me, because it was a way of separating self from others. It wasn't about taking personal responsibility as an act of being a good Christian. It was a way to marginalize others. And I challenged it. And I said, if personal responsibility causes you to feel anger against another group of people, I can't see how that's Christian. I just can't. And secondly, personal responsibility that comes as a judgment based on your experience of life and not looking at the experience of others, it's not the same thing. It's just words in quotes,
right,
that you're following as dogma, as opposed to really looking at the real condition. My relationship with Christianity is really just the compassion piece. I don't see a higher view than that of living a compassionate life. I'm not Christ. I'm not Mary. I'm not any of the saints. But what I've gleaned from all of it is that compassion and love and kindness are really the path to get there.
I think, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I didn't, you said what about me in Parkland, but it made me cry. Not so much about the violent part of it, but what the young people did to show that they weren't going to be used anymore. That we're not going to play victim. We're going to be someone that other young people can look up to. When it was on, I began texting my nieces who are about their age, and I said, I hope you're watching this. You better be watching this. This is your future. These are your peers. And I am looking forward to the next couple of years, because those young people are going to be in the forefront leading.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to me, that's a dynamic change in how things will go about, because they don't want it to be like it was before. They don't want the same people giving their thoughts and prayers and then nothing changes, and they don't, that's what they said. We don't want your thoughts and prayers. We want change. So they're going to make it happen one way or another. And I'm just so proud. I wish adults would take them as role models and say, hey, I want to be like them. That's what we said. We want to be like them.
I wanted to get right back into the streets, right? My body told me otherwise, but I was ready.
But what has happened in Parkland and the other shootings and school shootings and in the community really touches us deeply, because we can see when we're watching the news, we can see, truly see beyond just the visual, the suffering that those young people are going through, the trauma that they're going through, because we've seen it repeatedly. And it's something that really never leaves you. That's yours for the rest of your life. How you deal with that trauma is really what's important. And I think that's what the young people are saying, that we're not just going to sit back and be victims. Yeah. And we're going to do something really different this time. And that's our hope and prayer.
Yeah. I'm wondering if it's a question I've had when, in light of violence and all of these macro and micro aggressions against so many different groups of people in many different ways. I'm wondering if, like under a different administration, it made me wonder if students, like the Parkland students, would feel so compelled to mobilize, or do you think it's also because things have exasperated to a point, or it's reached a level where people are saying enough is enough? Do you think that, I don't know, it's just something I've been thinking about, like under a different administration, would they need to be so vocal, or would it have been a different group of people being vocal and nothing getting done? Or I don't know.
Well,
it feels different to me. It feels different to me.
If you take the Me Too movement as an example, is it because of this administration, or is it because people finally said enough is enough? We don't want this anymore. And we know how entrenched it is and how long it's been going on. It took how long for all this to end? They're not even done yet. There's still a lot of other issues to come up. So I think from the standpoint of the young people, I think it was a combination of both. They'd lived through it. Some of the kids had been were old enough to have experienced, not in their community, but have seen on TV others, and then it visits theirs, just like the girl said in the most recent one. I knew it was going to come sooner or later. I knew it was going to happen. That's a terrible expectation. Terrible expectation.
And I think it's true too that all of the elements that have come together, whether it's climate change, the administration, all of the things that are coming together now are facilitating another movement. My wish is that they continue to find strength to keep going, because also in that universe are all the distractions to get you away from that purpose and away from that. I don't see this. We met a girl on a trip to Colorado waitress in the restaurant, and 23 years old, brilliantly beautiful and lovely, and is committed to being a physician to help the poor. That is what will make the world change. People like her, people like Cora will change the world. And I believe in her, and we told her that. And so now we're Facebook buddies, right? Because we want to follow her success and cheer her on at every option. And I think it comes down to that. It's the only way you can keep this kind of thing going isn't just another tragedy, but the support systems behind it that encourage, motivate, and maybe even educate kids to go out and do more.
Yeah. The other, so, since we look at almost everything through children, we look at a community through children. How are they being treated? How are they nurtured? What is the support around them? And so that to us is kind of the indication of how well a community is doing, by where they prioritize. Mm-hmm. And one of the projects that we were involved with at Hoover High School was Project Plus. And again, this is community, because this is the community of school. And what they found was that the transition from middle school to high school was very difficult, for young people. And there was no mechanism, nothing to help them make that transition. And so the school district got a grant to take ninth graders on a 3-day retreat, which we helped coordinate, and we taught some of the classes. And the whole point of it was to build relationship.
But not just in the school. And I think that this was one of the really significant things. It was also to build relationship of the school to the community, not the kids, right? Because schools are isolated places that just they're their own fiefdoms, right? I mean, that's really true. And we see it again and again and again, where they're just trying to protect their own little thing, missing out on this extraordinary wealth of experience and wisdom that is part of the community. So bringing in the police, and again, like he said, so many kids have a negative view of the police. Now they're climbing a rock wall with them. That changes things.
Going on hikes with them.
Yeah. So Parks and Rec. Oh, really? You made that arbor? Oh, wow! I'm so inspired. Or a chamber person, or someone from clergy. So they're having this different experience with people they would never have that experience with. This would go well with adults too. I mean, give us a different environment for all of us to interface in, and maybe we become our better selves.
There's so few systems and structures that exist currently that offer those opportunities. In fact, I see the opposite occurring when all these new buildings are going up, or when different neighborhoods are being regentrified. Like, there's so few places for like benches, or for people to congregate together, or just just space for adults to sit and to have a conversation.
So, and this is also, when you're talking about the institutional end of it, collaboration without competition. That's a key thing, because most of the agencies we would be working with were competing for what were perceived as few dollars, instead of really looking at building a collaborative of people rising to their highest ability and working together, not caring about the money, right? That would change a lot of things if we did that, if we could collaborate without competition.
I agree. I think too that when I think about how we're kind of wired here in the United States compared to other communities I've been in other countries that are more collectively oriented. The collective is, you know, what is important, like uplifting your community and those around you, and pushing, like every advancement by each individual contributes to the community moving forward, and it's really understood in that way. And we've been so mired in this mindset that, you know, we are each our own island who has to compete for the scraps or whatever, to like compete, and you know, whatever that means, and that whatever that entails. And I think that also when you have that element, and then you have a very isolationist society where we kind of feel like, a lot of us feel isolated through the structures that exist, or we self-segregate, we don't integrate ourselves and get to know other people. Then it's, you know, there's, and then with, you know, I just see so many problems unfolding because of those issues. Like a lot of people just suffering right now from depression and mental health and loneliness, and then becoming really angry, and then feeling like they have to act on that anger, and because they, you know, all of these different ways in which those emotions aren't being fueled in a positive, there's no positive outlets. And what I keep hearing from both of you is the need to really humanize one another, you know, by breaking down those walls of isolation, and actually finding spaces to meet, and to just get to know another person, to really listen to them and get to know them.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's look at homelessness. And how, you know, one of the precepts of Buddhism is to not to add to someone's suffering. They're already suffering. Do not add to it. And so you look at homelessness, and who would want to live in those conditions? I mean, when we go down to Los Angeles and drive around, and we see all these encampments, again, they're separating into their community. I don't think that's what they would like, but it's the only place that they feel accepted, because they're all experiencing the same thing of not having a home of their own. So, and then all we do is demonize them, and that kind of, they in their mind takes care of the problem just by demonizing them. One of the things that I found interesting is that cities really don't want to put up shelters for homeless, because they don't want to get known as a city with compassion. Therefore, others will come there, and then we have a bigger problem. So no, we don't want the shelters here, or don't publicize it. Don't tell people it's good, because we don't want them.
And I think this goes back to that personal responsibility issue. I mean, this has just recently come up, and so I'm thinking about it. And when we use that to demonize somebody, that's not that, you know, and not everybody has a bootstrap. I have people in my own family who didn't have a bootstrap to pull up, and they drank the same water I did, they ate the same food I did, they lived in the same places I did, but they don't have a bootstrap. And who am I to pass judgment on anybody, right? I mean, what I've experienced and looking at it so up close and personal, they did the best they could. Mm-hmm. And is it the life I wanted them to have? No, I would have wanted something different for them, but it's the life they had. And so I just love them. I just love them. And they don't have to do anything differently to be loved. They just don't. They can just be.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in any community, the ability to make real meaningful change is present. It's just, are we willing to make the effort? You know, you may have to go to places that scare you, make decisions that you necessarily wouldn't normally want to make. But I think we have the capability. We've seen it time and time again. And as we said earlier, it's just, how do you sustain that? How do you keep it going? You know, one of our ongoing challenges is that we never want the work that we did to just go by the wayside. We've always wanted to find some mechanism for it to continue because it's proven, not by our work, but it's proven to work by the young people who, like the wedding that we went to, was graduates of our program. Now in their 30s, yeah. So and always inevitably someone will come up to us and say, "Hey, you probably don't remember me, but I was in your class, and it really made a big difference in my life, and I'm so glad to see you because I've always wanted to look you up and to thank you." No, we didn't do anything. And then we just ask them about their lives. So what are you doing? Well, I'm a business owner now. And wow, that's amazing. We don't have anything to do with that. You did that. So, yeah. So in one way, it's really rewarding, but we don't want to take the credit for it. But we know that engaging them will make a difference. For instance, here they could do something here in Tehachapi. They could do something very simple that would bring so much joy to young people and also give them a different view of involvement. Yeah, of involvement in community. And the model was Santa Clarita, the city of Santa Clarita, decided that after our job training, that after the kids went through our job training, that they would have this big gathering at City Hall and honor the young people who graduated from the program, but not honored just by the city, by everybody. And at the end of the gathering, the young people would be walking out with certificates from the police, from the assembly, it was like, they were just like, wow, some of them, I've never received a certificate in my life, and we were so amazed of the step that the city themselves took upon themselves. We didn't say, hey, you need to get all these people together and give them, they just said, we're going to have this celebration and for the graduation, and please be there.
And they extended it to create, Students of the Month celebrations that they did every month after that, recognizing how important it was to acknowledge young people, not for doing nothing, but for caring, for doing something. And really, it was a powerful thing to watch and to see a city really recognize kids. When we did the project in Burbank, having them follow through with money to support programs that kids said were essential became extraordinarily important. And for reflection today, that one of the schools in Burbank has had 4 suicides in the last month or 2. Yeah. And the one program that they kept alive after that summit that we did was mental health in schools. Thank heaven. Right? Because kids are traumatized by this. They thought there was maybe a suicide pact, and I don't even know that, so I won't speak to it. But 4 kids from one school committing suicide in that period of time is horrifically traumatic. And yes, causes kids really question their own values and their own strengths and their own beliefs. And so to not have something in place where they have the network to do that is really important. Really important.
I think I'd like us to close today with a question about your vision for leadership. You talked about youth, but just your vision for leadership in the direction towards either peace or nonviolence, or ways to really transform systems as we know them.
I think that we have to really put a still pause on forward action until we figure some of this out. I mean, everybody's ready to just do without stopping to really think and process what they're doing. And if I were giving, a conversation to something about leadership to, say, Congress right now, I would have to challenge them on this partisanship thing, which is, I think, really un-American. Now I'm back to, I'm judging them on who's more American, but I think it's not what was dreamed for governance, and that there is benefit in compromise. There is benefit in listening to see what other people's points of view are.
It's called collaboration without competition.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. There's my coined phrase, right? It is.
Yeah, it's perfect.
I think I'll make a T-shirt or something, because that was one of them that came out recently in my head. But I think that's really it, is that we have to look at why we're doing something. There was, I saw this in a news feed today, a televangelist, one of those, wants to buy a $54 million jet so that he doesn't have to stop and refuel. And I'm stunned at truly the hypocrisy. And I say that with aspirations that man find happiness and the causes of happiness, and really find the soul of his practice again, because I really view that he's lost it. To think that is a good use of money when you have people who can't eat. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I can't Christ that, right? It's like, and he said he figured that Christ would be in a jet now to go spread the word, and I kind of don't think so. I think he'd be in the soup kitchens, because that was kind of his gig, right? I mean, that's my understanding of Christ, and I'm going to stick with that, because it's filled with a lot of love.
To me, I think as adults, we're just doing a terrible job of modeling for young people. Just a terrible, terrible job. And so if they're looking for leadership, or how leadership looks, and they see the vitriol that's present in just about every aspect of our lives right now, then where are they going to get the training from? Where are they going to, I want to be like him, or I want to be like her? I don't think so, unless that's your spirit, that you want to be evil and you want to hurt people and you only care about your group and forget about the others. I think we've decided long ago that inclusion is not important. So long as we take care of our own, then we're all right. And then, so that's why we're sometimes amazed when we hear of people including others that are outside of their group. Oh my God.
How wonderful.
Yeah, they
how thoughtful.
They care about someone.
Yeah.
So I think we have a long ways to go. I mean, if you look at our political system, I don't want young people to adopt that as a way of making this country great. No, that's not the way. If we're all there for the same reason, and there's probably a lot of argument over that, then I think we can find the solutions. But so long as we separate into camps, it's not going to happen. There's just no way that it can happen, because just the mere idea that I'm with this group, you're with that group, we're not going to ever come together. So.
Thank you both today for your time and for continuing the conversation. I always love talking with both of you, and I like carrying the conversation on into current times, to see how like those pillars and your ways of thinking apply to all the things that are unfolding currently. I think it's really important to keep weaving things that worked and continue working, but ways to reshape them and either like reapply them or reconceptualize them, because at the heart of your work is, you know, humanization of ourselves, and that's a constant. What's not a constant are all these systems around us and the ways that we've been, this competition piece of it that has been really, really divisive. And so I think continuing to have conversations and to just see how it unfolds is really important as things change, keep rapidly changing the way that they are.
Well, we're happy to do it, and we love the conversation with you as well. It feels like there's value in it. And so, you know, because today is such an auspicious day, if there's been any merit generated by this, it's dedicated to the enlightenment and joy of all living beings without a single exception.
That's beautiful. Thank you both.